Okay, so this is your go-to freelance heritage learning provider, and it's Tara Coggins.
Okay, they only asked me to do this just before lunch, so I've not got anything prepped for you. Wee bit of background about who I am. For 6 months a year, I work for Historic Scotland at both Dunstafnage Castle and Bunnoiron Furnace, which are two of arguably some of our best historic sites here in Argyll. I know that's a bit controversial in this group here. We've got wonderful, I know. But they are two pretty awesome sites. But that's not what I'm talking to you about today. For the other 6 months of the year, I work freelance, mostly directly with community groups and schools, although sometimes with organisations like here at the Rockfield Centre. I've done something with Kilmartin last year. A lot of the stuff I'm working with when I'm working with these groups, it's heritage based. A lot of the time it is local history, so it's really local to this area. So if, say, as happened last year, was Kilninver Primary School gets in touch and they're like, Tara, can you do us a workshop on Vikings? I go, yes, of course I can. So I bring out my normal Viking stuff, but before I go there, I will go and I will just do a wee bit of research to work out, okay, so these are all the Viking place names all round about it. And so we can start to actually bring in the history as close to them as possible and to make it real. One of the things that I find really important for when I'm doing workshops is that it is hands-on and it is practical. Okay, so for example, I brought this up today and actually I showed my table this earlier, so sorry for repeating myself. When you go to a museum and you see an object like this in a glass case, and you can see, well, you can see the size and you can see it's a bit shiny, and that's about all you can see. And if you can read okay, then you can read the information on the label, and that's great. But if you're a small child or someone with a learning disability or someone who maybe English isn't your first language, you're not getting very much information from it. See, as soon as you get the object and you can feel it, and all of a sudden you can feel the weight of it, you can smell it because it's leather in it, so it's got a distinctive smell. You can feel that it's cold. At the moment, this is slightly oily because it's a bit rusty last night, so I've oiled it all. So you get all these different textures and smells and weights, and all of a sudden you've got a whole lot of information that you would never have got just looking at it in a case. You would never have got when reading about the object. And it's a lot of information that's totally universal that you would get no matter what age you are or what your language is. And so when I do workshops, I like to have them as hands-on and as practical as possible. And there's lots of stuff, I do lots of textile-based stuff. So there's lots of spinning and weaving and that sort of stuff. Things like rotary querns, because great thing with rotary quern, you feel the effort that's involved in actually pushing it round. You can hear the sound it makes as the stones grind together. These are all really good things that when you're working with kids. And so I do a lot of these local-based topics. I also do topics that the schools do anyway, but that they can't get any access here. It's things like Romans or Egyptians or dinosaurs. Now, if you were in a school in Glasgow and you were doing those topics, you would just go to one of the museums. But here for a school to organise a bus and then to organise the first aiders and all the permissions and that involved, it's very expensive and very time consuming, and sort of organisationally it's quite difficult. Whereas I can go in with the objects and you can actually use them. Over the last year, I have worked with a number of primary schools locally. I have worked also with groups like Sea Wildling down in Creignish. They have a kids' club, the Sea Wildlings, and we were doing things like the Paleozoic Ocean, which was lots and lots of fun. The other thing that I'm involved in at the moment is the Young Archaeology Club, which is based here in Rockfield, and it is awesome. It really is. We've got about 16 kids that come once a month, and they are really engaged, and they want to really know about the heritage of this area. And so we have taken them on a walk through Oban, from here all the way up to the Nolly. We've invited the heritage hunters, and actually last time Mary and Caroline, there you are, came and spoke to them. We've done things like historic games with them, we've done medieval castles, and at the moment they're working on a really cool project. We are designing pop trump cards based on Oban's heritage. This is a bit hush-hush because we've not quite launched it yet. But the kids themselves have chosen the sites. The kids themselves are choosing the categories and how high up they should be. They're looking at things like, I jumped in ahead there. I'm assuming that you know what pop trumps is. It's a card game that the kids really enjoy playing. They'll have about 30 cards in each, and they play against each other, against which card's going to beat which. So our categories are things like the age at which the site was built, its distance from the Oban ferry terminal. They've also got how cool it is to visit, and that is their choice themselves, the kids. And then at the bottom, they've got one cool fact. If there was one thing, and this is the kids' point of view, not our point of view as adults, what do they think is the most interesting thing about that site to drag them along? So that we're working on that at the moment. We're hoping to have it out for Easter, possibly slightly later, but I will keep you involved, up to date with that. The other thing that I do is that I also organise the Heritage Tent at the Argyllshire Gathering. The Heritage Tent is quite good because we get together as a bunch of heritage sites. And yes, we're talking to the public and all the people that come to the games itself, but we get a chance of networking and catching up and talking about what it is that we've been doing, which is really quite good as well. I will be in touch with everybody shortly about that. Okay.
I'm here.
Oh,
Thank you. Thank you, Tara, for stepping in at the last minute, but that was very, very interesting. She's booked for Mull Historical and Archaeological Society for a visit to Dunstafnage this year. So thank you, Tara, very, very much indeed. And our final 5-minute burst voice today is Mary Braithwaite from Ling History Group. Mary. The microphone. Oh, yes. Yes. Right. Yeah. Just speak to the microphone.
I think if I stand here, I'll disappear completely. So
Let's just
can you hear me if I speak? Okay, it's fine. This is a story of lockdown. So back in 2020, a few years before that, the history group with ACFA, some members are here, which is a field archaeology group, Alison, Susan, myself, started doing an archaeological field survey, walkover survey of Ling. Ling's not very big, for those of you who know it. But of course it came to a halt with lockdown. At the same time, one of the things that we received in the history group, and I'm not sure if it wasn't through the forum, but Zoe can correct me, was that Historic Environment Scotland had a new community officer. And the request went out to community groups, local groups, for suggestions of things that Historic Environment Scotland could do to help us. And so we put our hand up and we said, well, yes, we'd like two things. We'd like help with a LiDAR survey, and we would also like help taking harmful vegetation from the walls of Kilhatton Church. And in fact, both wishes came true, but this one came first. By the summer time, we were in dialogue with them, and they said, well, yes, we can arrange a cost price flight for you. We would have to pay for the LiDAR flight. and we'll do all the data analysis for you. The flight was going to cost £14,000. And we thought, wow, how do we raise that? So we didn't have that in our budget. But we thought, well, okay, long shot, we'll just try. So we contacted everyone on Ling. This included people who've got second homes on Ling, just went through our networks, other networks. And within 4 days, we had pledges of £14,000. I mean, I think it can be done if you hit the right moment, promoting it in the right way. And I think lockdown really helped a lot. So the flight, finally, we had a date fixed for the flight, and everyone was quite nervous because we weren't sure if the weather was going to be. It was weather dependent, of course. We heard first thing in the morning that it was going to go ahead, so we let everyone know, so people had their heads out of their houses looking for it. So the flight went over ahead, which was very exciting. And then, of course, it's been a much slower job of dealing with data. Later that year and into the sort of early part of the following year, Historic Environment Scotland analysed the data. And what we'd also wanted was that would be publicly available. So that is all the data from the flight, from the survey, is available on the Scottish Government's data portal. One of the reasons why we wanted the LiDAR flight was because we felt that it would provide a complementary source of information about the archaeological sites that would complement the field survey. And what we also wanted to use it for was, with assembling all that information together, was to then, which is what we are about finally, I think, to do, sitting down with Claire Ellis, the Argyll archaeologist, is to create a kind of interactive map of sites on Ling so that people who can't get out themselves, walk the hills, walk the island, can get access to all that information. So it'll be like a kind of mini past map. You'll be able to click on sites and get access to photographs and images and other information. The data has been actually, things we didn't expect about the data was that it's been used to, as part of the analysis of coastal erosion up at Callipore, and it's been used also in the context of a small-scale slate project, which is going to reopen Callipore slate quarry, which is an initiative of Historic Environment Scotland as well. And so this is kind of been one of our big stories, in terms of I think the question now is, what I heard from Mo is maybe that's the kind of thing that we should do. We have fantastic images from the LiDAR survey, but they're definitely complementary to good aerial photographs, and they're also I think very complementary to the field walking. So all those wet, windy days that we were out absolutely were worth it. We're working on the final report now of that. And so that LiDAR won't answer everything, but with those other sources of information, we think it's going to contribute quite a lot in terms of our understanding of the archaeology of Ling.
Thank you. Okay. Congratulations.